Hey everyone, welcome to Don't Worry Wednesday, the show where we discuss any issues or challenges you may be having. The concern we are handling in this segment comes from Anonymous, and it reads, "When I was younger, I remember most things I was told, like every bully's words and every time I got hurt by them. My mom and dad never hit me and I barely got in trouble, but sometimes I wish they did one of those things more when I did something wrong. So, in turn, I took everything to heart every time they yelled at me. I don't steal, I don't talk about my feelings, I don't fight back, and I don't say when I'm hurting. I'm afraid of my dad because he yelled at me more and sounded more angry. I tried to forget, but I can't. Every time I do something wrong, I cry. Like if I add too much sauce, I cry. If I fail at sports, I cry. If I get lower than an A in something, I cry. I can't look at him without thinking he's going to yell at me, even now, and he never yells at me."
Cool. He said, "Yep, we're all good." So, yeah.
Good. Well, Anonymous, thank you so much for asking. I'm just assuming you want me to jump in.
Yeah, go for it.
So
Please.
if I step on your toes, Ryan, I apologize.
No, my pinky toe.
No, my toe, it hurts. Boy, I totally can relate. One of the things, it takes a lot of guts to put this out there, Anonymous. So thank you. And it's not an easy thing. One thing that I've learned about, because I am very, very sensitive to words. And it's because my love language is words of affirmation. There are 5 love languages. If you get the book, The 5 Love Languages, it goes through, all the different love languages. And mine, the one,
It's kind of like part of your personality, but not necessarily relating to like the 16 personalities or anything. It's a separate thing, but it's like part of who you are.
Yep. And so, but it's very interesting because, I take words to heart more than I take anything else to heart. Like, if somebody punches me, it doesn't bother me as much as if, somebody says a mean word to me or says something that's very harsh to me, and likewise in the opposite direction, if somebody gives me a hug, I don't feel loved as much as if someone says something encouraging and uplifting and loving towards me. So, it kind of moves in that direction. So it sounds to me like it's possible that words have a greater impact on you than other things. So it's a good base to start from, to recognize that about yourself and understand, okay, so I am affected by words, more than any other thing that's out there. People say things without thinking all the time. And I'm not saying this is happening to you, Anonymous, but I just know in my life, what I had to learn was that, what? There were a lot of things that got said to me when I was growing up from lots of different people. And I'm a perfectionist, at heart anyway. So I can totally relate to what you're saying here. Every time I do something wrong, I feel really bad about it. Anytime I make a mistake, anytime one little thing, if, like you get too many grains of salt on something, I shook it one too many times. It's totally ruined and I'm a failure. And, all these kinds of different things, these thoughts crop up. I would not allow myself to make a mistake based on some of the things that had happened. And, it's a real wake-up call for me as a parent to be mindful of how I treat my kids. Because I don't want them to be afraid to make mistakes. I don't want them to be, You know, like I don't want them to feel uncomfortable coming to me when they do make a mistake, because I don't want to like belittle them and make them feel like they're idiots because they screwed up. I mean, I mess things up all the time, and you know, I've been able to grow personally to that point where now I don't worry so much if I make a mistake. It's still there, but it's just lessened to a certain degree. And, you know, that type of change really only happens over time. And it takes some effort, you know, to reprogram yourself a little bit to help you understand that, hey, it's okay to make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes all the time. And that's how innovations happen. That's how new things come about, is mistakes. You know, that's how when you're searching for something in the dark, or you're blindfolded, or you're looking for something. You know, maybe I'm looking for my pen that's on my desk, and it's dark. You know, and I'm feeling around. Every time I don't feel my pen, that's a mistake. But then eventually, as I feel around enough, oh, hey, there's my pen. Hey. And you find it. So I made like 25 mistakes in trying to find my pen until I finally got it. And it's also like learning to walk. How many times do you think we fall before we learn how to walk? Before we learn how to stand first, and then we learn how to walk. You know, it takes so many failures to get to the point where we actually succeed at something. And I'm sorry for all the harsh words that have been said to you. I'm so sorry. I think probably, you know, more than likely, I mean, if your dad has been angry, you know, there may have been something that your dad's been dealing with. You know, there may be some issues that are unresolved there that are causing anger. So it's not just you. Most of the time, when somebody's mad at us, like really mad, and they're mad all the time, it's not us that's the problem. Like when I went around for a long time in my life, I was angry at everybody. Anybody would do anything and I would be angry at them. I would yell and I would be angry and I would be passive aggressive. I wouldn't talk to them for a while and I would just torment them with dirty looks.
That's mean, man.
I know. It was horrible. And you know, the problem wasn't them. Oh, big deal. They made a mistake. Everybody makes mistakes. Big deal. No, the problem was me. The problem was I had issues that were unresolved. And so I was projecting anger upon everybody because of the issues that I had with me that I had to fix. So sometimes that's the case where maybe you're dealing with people that have self-esteem issues, which pretty much everybody has some kind of self-esteem issue, or you know, other unresolved issues in their life that cause them to just treat people this way automatically. And I'm sorry that you have to have contact with someone that's going through that. But you should understand, it's not you. When you make a mistake, you make a mistake. Big deal. It's not, you know, there is very little that we do that we make mistakes on that matters even 10 minutes from the time we make the mistake, let alone a week from when we make the mistake, let alone a year from when we make the mistake. I remember my boss one time, you know, he was trying to figure out, you know, what was going on. I had this job and I had the owner of the company needed me to move to a different location. There were multiple locations of this store, and they needed me to move, and it was going to be a totally different city. And I had a lease on a house that I was renting in this one city, and I had like 8 months left on this lease. And they needed me to move to a different city. And he was like, well, I guess I'm buying out your lease because I need you to move to this other city. And we talked to my landlord, and he didn't want to, we had a lease, we had an agreement, by his right, obviously he's entitled to the money for the lease. Otherwise he would have rented it to somebody else, And so he didn't have to buy out the whole lease. He just paid it until it was able to be re-rented. But he did that. And I was like, wow, man, what made you do that? He said, I just look at it this way. I needed you to move, and you were willing to move. And I appreciate that. And 5 years from now, that money isn't going to matter. The money I used to buy your lease out is not going to matter. So he would take it the 5-year rule. He's like, is it going to matter 5 years from now? No. What's going to matter more 5 years from now is that you move to this other location. And whatever it takes to get there. And so you can treat it like that with any mistake. You can look at it and you can be like, is this going to matter a year from now? Is this going to matter 2 weeks from now? And in sports, I see that if you fail at sports, it's upsetting. I've been through that too. But one thing that, people who are very, very great athletes, like Michael Jordan will say, I miss more shots than I make. And I said, the real key is, can you just brush off that mistake? Can you brush off that failure and get set for the next one? Be like, I'm going to make the next one. I'm going to make the next one. I'm going to make the next one. And continue to look forward. And so I would encourage you to start to think in terms of that, just looking forward rather than looking at the present or the past and these mistakes. Because if we keep a scorecard of our mistakes, man, that's going to be one of the most depressing things that, ever. And it will haunt you, and it will create negative feelings in your life. And then maybe you'll turn into somebody like me who was just angry at everybody because I had all these mistakes that were haunting me all the time. It could turn into that. So I don't know if any of that helped, because I also know that sometimes when we're in the middle of something, even if somebody says something encouraging, we kind of have this knee-jerk, they just don't understand, response, And I get that. I understand that, that might be the case. So I hope that can help redirect, what's going on for you. And Ryan, I'm going to turn it over to you. So.
Thanks, Joe. That was really good. I mean, I don't know. I'm so glad that you went first, because there was a lot of really great things. And I feel like in a lot of ways you relate to Anonymous in this more than I do in some places, for sure. And I think that's really great, because you're able to give a lot of guidance there. So I would just listen to what Joe had to say again if you need more, because I'll tell you what, there are many times when I listen to something and I thought I got everything the person was saying, but then I listened to it again and I'm like, wait, how come I didn't hear that before? Like years later, I'll listen to it like for the 5th time and I'll still hear something I didn't even pick out before. And our minds do that to us. So it's kind of interesting, because I think what happens is, our brains focus on a certain sentence and then our minds get carried off with that. And then we miss the next line or whatever it is. But anyways, what Joe had to say was great. I'll tell you, you said that even though you did add that your dad doesn't even really yell at you that often. I can understand having that scar. I'm the same as Joe as far as words of affirmation being my love language, meaning, words are what affect me the most, whether that is to feel loved or to feel hated, and bullied, and etc. Words are important to me, which is why I was always, when people say actions over words, that sort of thing, I've always wanted to like punch them in the face and be like, no, you're wrong. Sorry, but no, words matter. Words are just as important as the action a lot of times, especially to me, not to everybody. But anyways, but yeah, I can understand feeling scarred about being worried every time you look at somebody about what they're going to say or how they're going to treat you, even though you are sure that like, oh, they have, they love me and they're probably not going to yell at me because they never yell at me, but yet every time you see them, you're still worried. I understand that. I've been there before. And, some of those things, they're just there because of past experiences you've had, and they were scarring or they were annoying or they happened a lot in the past and they don't happen anymore, but it's just still something that's in the back of your head every time you think about that person. And really the only way to get rid of that is to have conversations with that person and open up about it. At least through my experiences, if you have because when in that situation, you have a relationship and what's holding you back from a better form of that relationship is you, because your thoughts are making you worried about the person, even though you're not supposed to be worried, even though you have no reason to be. Something in the back of your head makes you afraid or whatever. And the only way to open that relationship back up and continue moving it forward is to have an honest talk about that subject with the person, because then you're opening up your vulnerableness to them and that allows them to affect it. Because if you don't open up to them, then they can't change anything, right? If you don't tell them, then they don't have the ability to have a sincere conversation with you that says, oh, I'm sorry for doing that in the past, or, whatever they need to say to help you move forward. So you might have to be open with that to your father in order for that to move forward. If you find the courage to get into that position, because I totally understand that. Now, of course, there are things you can do for yourself to get over it without ever having to confront them, but that road is a lot longer and doesn't really include them. And it's a lot harder, but it's not really like I have no way to say this is the path, because it's really just up to your brain and it's hard to guide in that sort of thing. So when you're worried about someone's reaction or whatever, just open up to them about it. And I think that will do you the best. I hope that makes sense. And the other thing was, being worried about, being upset over every failure. I mean, I get it. But I'll tell you, I used to be like that a lot. Very, very worried about, so worried about what people thought of me. But, also always afraid of messing up to the point of never trying, like, oh, I won't even, like you say you'll cry when you put the sauce in and you mess the sauce up or something. I'll cry when, I'll be so afraid of messing that up. I won't even try and I'll make someone else do it. Right. That's kind of how I was. But it wasn't until, the end of high school when I started to decide to get out of my shell and realize I need to make mistakes. I need to purposefully embarrass myself. I need to purposefully mess up in front of people at my own expense, because it actually caused other people to laugh and have a good time, and it helped me grow. When I started to take life more seriously and less seriously at the same time. I stopped taking myself so seriously and thinking that I had to do everything perfectly. But I also took life more seriously in the aspect of what can I do to make myself a better person? What can I do to make me the best version of myself? What can I do that's uncomfortable, that I'll have to force myself through and might be really awkward, and I might, I might make a lot of failures. Other people might laugh at me, but what do I have to do regardless of all those things so that I can move forward? And then doing those things, I'll tell you, that just, when I did that, it changed my entire perspective on life. And I no longer really got too scared of taking action anymore, because I realized it was okay if I mess up. That's just part of the process. It's okay if I make food and the food doesn't turn out very well. I can eat it anyways, and then I'll know what not to do next time. And eventually sometime I might end up with an awesome recipe. And I've done that before, recently I tried a couple of different things with eggs. I put in, a little bit of, rice vinegar in my eggs to see what it would do to the eggs when I cooked them. And then I put in alcohol with, it's a weird alcohol to put in, but vodka, but it's what I had. So I put vodka in my eggs when I cooked them just to see what the eggs would do. But I knew I was going to eat it regardless, and that's okay. It didn't taste amazing, but it was good enough for food substance. But ultimately, it was like an experiment. So if you can think of your life more as an experiment and a trial and error of how do I make this human being grow, and that human being being yourself, what experiments can I run my body through? What experience can I run my mind through and get over them? Because a lot of things is just running the ropes. A lot of it's just taking action and then reaping the benefits afterwards. So like when I cooked the eggs with vinegar, I realized it did something really interesting. It made the eggs almost creamy, which was cool. It makes me think, okay, so I didn't really care for the rice wine, but let's try a different wine or different acidic substance. So I tried vodka. It didn't make the eggs creamy. So it's something specifically in the vinegar. It's all an experiment. I wouldn't even call them necessarily failures. They are failures because they didn't turn out tasty, but they're an experiment. And sometimes, that happens in life too. Sometimes you go snowboarding, right? Or something. And then you're like, okay, you get up on the snowboard and you instantly fall over and you're like, dang, I am terrible at the snowboard. Well, yes, of course. No matter how many times you're on a snowboard, you fall. Everybody on a snowboard falls. That's part of snowboarding, honestly. And at some point you're so used to falling that you don't even remember that you've fallen. Like, I know that I can talk to people who were, really into snowboarding, and the way that they would snowboard and they would fall and get up, like in under a second, they would fall and get back up. And then they wouldn't even remember that they ever fell. It would be out of their mind because it's just a part of the process of snowboarding is the failure of falling about once every other second, but you don't realize it anymore that it's even happening because you're like, this is just how this moves. This thing causes you to fall over when you're standing still or whatever. And that's kind of how life is. So ultimately, yeah, just listen to Joe's part again. But yeah, it's okay to make mistakes. Mistakes are good. And maybe just talk to the situation that you're having. When you're worried about talking to your dad, you're worried that he's going to yell at you. Be open about that with him and see where that goes. I feel like that's one of the best ways you can improve a relationship is to tell them where you're vulnerable, because then they are there to support you in that, and try to work out. One thing I would recommend, though, when you talk about that to your father, it's very important to let them know that you don't think it's their fault, and that it's your own mental battle. it's important to come at it from the angle of like, hey, I'm having this struggle and it's my fault. You've done nothing wrong, but for some reason, it scares me to talk to you because I always feel like you're going to yell at me, even though you never yell at me. This is just some weird thing that's in my head and I don't know why it's there. And I'm wondering, how do I get past this? What do you think? If you open up to them, letting them know that it's a mental battle you have in your head and it's not their fault, you might be surprised at where it goes. But that's my main recommendation for that. So, but yeah, and I've known you for a while. Now Joe doesn't really know you, but I've known you, and honestly, I noticed you improve in a lot of things. And so just keep on doing what you're doing and keep on moving forward. Keep on putting yourself outside of your comfort zone. And I'm sure things will continue to get better, and I think you've already seen a lot of improvement in yourself. And so I just keep going down that road and you'll see even more.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And one thing I forgot to say was, because it seems like there are a lot of things in this challenge of yours that are coming from other people, your mom, your dad, the other people in your life. And I'll tell you, the peace that comes through forgiving other people is absolutely incredible. The healing, because this insecurity you feel about making mistakes, this problem of being afraid to fail and being afraid to make mistakes, all these things, there's an underlying insecurity that's caused by all of these things that have happened to you. And when you get to the point where you in your heart are able to truly forgive others for the wrongs that they've committed towards us, the peace and the healing that comes from that smooths out that insecurity. And it won't matter so much to make a mistake. It won't even matter so much that they get upset if they do. Because it's just like, well, hey, you start to see things rather than being afraid or being fearful that this person's going to yell at you. You almost more start to pity the other person because they're in a bad spot, or else they wouldn't be acting that way. And it's almost like, man, I wish there was something I could do to help them through this
so true.
negative experience they're having. But that, that starts with learning to forgive, and that's not always an easy road. And sometimes it takes time. It's not like an instantaneous thing all the time. Sometimes it can be a simple decision, and then all of a sudden everything's smoothed out. But a lot of times it takes some digging around and really getting at the root in your heart. What am I forgiving this person for? What are these things that I need to forgive this person for? And that can really, really help. So I would encourage you to try and find ways to do that as you move through this journey. And it sounds like you've already taken some great strides, from what Ryan was saying. So that's awesome, Anonymous. And I'm really happy to hear that. But yeah, just keep on going and keep coming back, keep listening. I like listening to Ryan because, if I listen to myself, I don't learn very much.
Honestly though, sometimes you learn the most when you listen to yourself. Sometimes.
I'm like, I said that?
Yeah. Whoa, that's weird.
I better start living up to that if I said that.
No, actually, I really like what you said about forgiveness because that's extremely important. Oh my gosh, is it important? Being able to forgive my bullies, even like literally in the second when they were doing something mean to me, changed everything. because as soon as I was able to just forgive and let people off the hook, and not be mad at people for being jerks, it's just like you said, you start to pity them. And pity is not a bad thing. It is not a mean thing. I think a lot of people think pity is to look down on. It is not. I think, you see in a movie, like you see in the movies, don't pity me, whatever. Pity is a beautiful thing. The problem is people who are really prideful say, don't pity me, because they feel like they're being looked down on. But in truth, pity is extremely beautiful, because pity isn't to look down on, it's to look lovingly upon. It's to look at someone and say, I wish it was better for them. So pity is not a bad thing. So it's not looking down on someone, it's just looking at somebody the right angle, honestly, at the angle of, wow, I hope things get better for them.
Mm-hmm.
So when you feel bad for somebody, that's empathy, and that's pity.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, pity is a form of support. So anyways, but yeah, forgiveness is huge. But yeah, and if you want to remember, if you want help with forgiveness, Joe has given some great advice on that in previous streams. I'm sure you've heard him talk about different things there, but yeah.
So it helped a lot of my neurotic feelings when I was led in the direction of forgiving others, and I had to dig back a long time, to some moments that were defining moments that I didn't realize were defining moments that hurt me to the point where I made a shift in my thinking, and those moments, when I walked through the forgiveness process with those people, and I haven't talked to those people. So one of those people in that situation I haven't talked to since I was in 7th grade when the incident happened.
And yet that defines you a lot of how you think.
It was amazing. And then, but that moment stuck with me. And when I was able to go back in my mind and in my heart and forgive and let go, then it was amazing that so many other areas of my life got fixed. Because it was like, all that was smoothed out. And there were so many seemingly unrelated areas, but they were all neuroses based on this wrong thought process that I had based on this incident where I was holding a grudge. It was crazy. And if I could just take that change of feeling that I had in my heart when I was able to walk through that process and just give it to you and put it in your heart so you would see what it feels like, I would. And then it would, you would run to chase down those moments that you need to forgive someone for. It's incredible, the peace that comes from that. So,
yeah, I think a lot of us are searching in life for peace. It's one of those rare, for so many, it is so rare. And it's like, peace, what is that? Like, how do you even get it? Peace, one of the most desired resources in our lifetime is peace. It's like one of those things where people like can't get enough and they barely get any at all. And I'll tell you, you can't be peaceful if you're holding grudges, because a grudge requires that there's not peace. In order to have peace, forgiveness is required. But it's one of the most refreshing things and one of the most important things when it comes to making a decision. If you make a decision when you're already at peace, it's so easy, and it makes the decision-making process easier and more logical, and also you're okay with the decision that you made. But if you're not at peace, beginning the decision process of anything, of any action, becomes all convoluted and really hard to figure out, and etc. So being at peace is really important.
Mhm.
And it's so rare in our world today. But if you find time to forgive, that will definitely take you on that journey towards peace, because a lot of the war that's raging on in our mind comes from a lack of forgiveness, whether it be for ourselves or for others.
Mhm.
You know?